The rain hammered the tin roof of the roadside shelter like a relentless drumbeat, turning the cracked asphalt into a slick mirror of grey skies. Inside, huddled on a weathered bench, was a little girl no older than 5, her dark hair matted and clinging to her tear-streaked face. She clutched a faded stuffed rabbit, its ears limp from too many desperate hugs, and rocked back and forth, her small voice breaking into whimpers that cut through the storm's roar. Abandoned? Lost? The shelter's single bulb flickered overhead, casting long shadows that made the empty space feel like a cage. No parents in sight, no car pulling up, just the girl, alone, her eyes wide with the kind of fear that etches itself into a child's soul forever. The thunder rolled closer, and that's when the low growl cut through it, a deep, throaty rumble that vibrated the ground. Headlights pierced the downpour like searchlights, slicing through the sheets of rain. A lone motorcycle pulled up to the shelter's edge, its chrome gleaming wetly under the storm's assault. The rider killed the engine, the sudden silence amplifying the rain's patter. He was a broad-shouldered man in his late 40s, weathered by sun and road, his face lined like old leather. Victor Ashline Park swung his leg over the bike, shaking water from his worn black jacket. The leather was scarred from years of miles, carrying the faint sense of engine oil, desert dust, and a hint of plain soap, the kind that lingered from hurried mornings at dusty motels. He spotted her immediately, that tiny figure shrinking into the bench. Victor's boots splashed through puddles as he approached, his steps measured, not wanting to startle her. "Hey, kiddo," he said softly, his voice gravelly but kind, like distant thunder that's already passed. "You okay out here? Where's your folks?" She looked up, her brown eyes locking onto his, and for a moment, the world narrowed to just them, the rain, the shelter, the unspoken weight of isolation. She didn't answer at first, just stared, her lower lip trembling. Then, hesitantly, she reached out a small hand, her fingers brushing the edge of his jacket. The leather was cool and damp, but it was the smell that hit her, the unmistakable mix wafting up as she leaned closer. Oil from long rides, dust from forgotten trails, and that clean, soapy undertone. Her eyes widened further, not in fear now, but in something deeper, like recognition dawning through the haze of terror. "I know this smell," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rain. It's you, the man from the bad night." Victor's breath caught, a sharp intake that felt like a punch to the gut. He froze, his hand hovering mid-air, as if the world had tilted on its axis. The bad night. Those words unlocked a vault in his mind, one he'd bolted shut years ago. It was 2018, a humid summer evening on a winding back road in the Midwest. Victor had been riding solo then, just another drifter piecing together his life after the service, when he'd come upon the wreckage. A family sedan crumpled against a guardrail, smoke curling from the hood, the air thick with the acrid bite of burnt rubber and twisted metal. Inside, a young woman, barely 25, pinned and bleeding, her cries faint but fierce as she shielded the infant strapped in the car seat beside her. He'd acted on instinct, no hesitation. Ripping off his jacket to staunch the flow from her leg, Victor had pried the door open with raw strength, the metal groaning in protest. "Hold on," he'd growled, lifting her out carefully, her weight light against his frame. The baby, a girl, tiny and wailing, had been next, bundled into his arms as sirens wailed in the distance. The woman's name was Elena Lynn, he'd learned in those frantic moments, her voice weak but urgent. "Promise me. Promise you'll check on her, Hope. My little Hope, if I can't." Her eyes, so like the child's now staring up at him, had pleaded. Victor had nodded, the weight of it settling like iron on his chest. "I promise. I'll make sure she's safe." But life had a way of derailing even the best intentions. The crash investigation dragged on, red tape and bureaucracy swallowing the details. Victor had coordinated aid through his old network. fellow vets and riders who'd rallied supplies and support, but deployments pulled him away, then a string of jobs across state lines. He'd meant to follow up, to find that little girl named Hope, but the road had a pull, and guilt had a way of burying itself under miles of asphalt, until now. The girl, Hope, it had to be, tugged at his jacket again, her touch pulling him back. Mummy said the man with the smelly jacket would come back. She said he saved us. Tears welled in her eyes, mirroring the rain outside. Victor's knees buckled slightly. He sank onto the bench beside her, the leather creaking under his weight. His throat tightened, emotions crashing over him like the storm, regret, shock, a fierce protectiveness igniting in his core. "I'm Victor," he managed, his voice cracking for the first time in years. "And yeah, I think I might be that man." In that moment, as the rain eased to a drizzle, something shifted. The promise he'd buried rose like a ghost, demanding to be honored. Victor pulled out his phone, dialing the number for Iron Promise, the brotherhood he'd walked away from, but could never fully leave. They were more than a club. They were the family you forged in fire, bound by oaths that outlasted blood. "Hawk, it's Ashline," he said when the line connected, his words steadying. "I need the crew. Found a ghost from the past. A little girl who needs us." As the first responders arrived, lights flashing through the mist, Victor stayed by her side, his jacket now a shield around her shoulders. The scent that had triggered it all mingled with the petrichor of the earth, a reminder that some promises, no matter how faded, could still spark a light in the dark. But questions loomed. Where was Elena now? Why was Hope alone in this storm? And what shadows from that night had followed them here? The road ahead stretched uncertain, but for the first time in years, Victor felt the pull of purpose, not just survival, but redemption. The convoy's engines would roar soon, brothers answering the call. A single act, born of a child's touch, was about to weave their fates together, challenging a system that had tried to forget the vulnerable. Honor wasn't loud, it was this, quiet, enduring, unbreakable. The paramedics' lights painted the shelter in pulsing blues and reds, turning the rain-slicked walls into a kaleidoscope of urgency. Victor kept his arm around Hope, her small frame pressed against him, as if he were the only anchor in the storm's aftermath. The lead responder, a wiry woman with a clipboard and a no-nonsense gaze, knelt beside them, her voice cutting through the drizzle like a lifeline. "Sir, can you tell us what happened here? The child's alone. Any idea who she is?" Victor's jaw tightened, the weight of that forgotten promise pressing down like the sodden leather on his back. He glanced at Hope, her fingers still twisted in the edge of his jacket, as if letting go might unravel everything. "Her name's Hope Lynn," he said, the words tasting like gravel. "She's 5. I know her from a long time back, crash on a back road years ago. Her mother's Eleanor." The paramedic's eyes narrowed, jotting notes, but Victor could see the flicker of skepticism, the system at work, already categorizing, questioning. They loaded Hope onto a stretcher gently, her stuffed rabbit tucked under one arm. But she whimpered and reached for Victor. "Don't go," she murmured, her voice a fragile thread. He nodded to the paramedic, climbing into the ambulance beside her. The doors sealed with a hydraulic hiss, and the vehicle lurched forward, sirens slicing the night. Inside, the air smelled of antiseptic and damp wool, a stark contrast to the road's wild freedom. Victor held her hand, small and cold in his calloused palm, as the EMT checked her vitals. No major injuries, just exposure and exhaustion, but the real wounds ran deeper, echoes of abandonment that mirrored his own buried regrets. As the ambulance wove through rain-glistened streets toward the local clinic, Victor's phone buzzed in his pocket. It was Hawk, Tom "Hawk" Daniels, the iron core of their brotherhood, his voice booming through the speaker like an engine revving to life. "Ashline, you son of a gun. Been too long. What's this about a ghost and a kid? Crew's mobilizing. I'll have eyes on you in 30. Victor exhaled, the tension in his shoulders easing a fraction. Iron Promise wasn't just a club. It was a vow etched in scars and shared silences. Veterans and riders who'd traded war zones for highways, bound by the unyielding code of keeping your word. By the time they reached the clinic, a squat building on the edge of town, its windows glowing like hesitant beacons, the rain had softened to a misty veil. Hope was wheeled inside, Victor trailing like a shadow, his boots leaving wet prints on the linoleum. The intake nurse, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes shadowed by fatigue, took one look at him and raised an eyebrow. "Family?" she asked, clipboard poised. Victor hesitated, the lie bitter on his tongue, but Hope's grip on his hand tightened. "Something like that," he replied, his voice low. They settled her in a curtained bay, the beeps of monitors a steady rhythm underscoring the quiet. Hours blurred in the sterile hush. Victor paced the hallway, the scent of his jacket, now draped over a chair, wafting faintly, a tether to the outside world. He'd pieced together fragments from Hope's drowsy whispers. Elena had fought through recovery after the crash, raising her alone on the fringes, scraping by with odd jobs. But lately, shadows had crept in, evictions, suspicious calls, a system that shuffled the vulnerable aside, like yesterday's news. Hope had wandered off during a storm-chased bus ride, lost in the downpour, her only landmark, the roadside shelter. Dawn crept in, painting the sky in bruised purples when the rumble announced their arrival. Victor stepped outside, the cool air sharp against his skin, and there they were. A line of motorcycles arcing into the parking lot like dark arrows, engines purring to a halt. Hawk led them, his frame imposing even off the bike, salt and pepper beard framing a face carved by battles long past. Beside him rode Jax, the quiet medic of the group, and Lena, a former nurse who'd patched more than wounds in their ranks. They dismounted in unison, leather creaking, the collective scent of oil and resolve hanging in the mist. "Ashline," Hawk said, clasping his forearm in a grip that spoke volumes. "You look like hell. What's the play?" Victor nodded toward the clinic, recounting the night in clipped sentences. The touch, the words, the flood of memory. Hawk's eyes hardened, not with judgment, but the fire of shared purpose. "That promise. It's ours now. Iron Promise doesn't let ghosts ride alone." They moved inside as a unit, their presence shifting the air, less intruders, more guardians. The nurse at the desk straightened, sensing the tide turn. Hope perked up when they entered her bay, her eyes lighting on the newcomers with wary curiosity. Jax knelt by her bed, pulling a small toy truck from his saddlebag, a simple gesture that coaxed a tentative smile. "Hey, little rider," he said softly. "Heard you know a good jacket when you smell one." Lena checked her chart, her touch gentle, while Hawk pulled Victor aside. "We dug quick. Elena's in a halfway house 2 towns over. Crash left her with debts the state never cleared. They tried to place Hope in foster care last month, but she bolted, systems corrupt as ever, shuffling folks like cards." Victor's fists clenched, the old anger simmering, not at Elena, but at the machine that ground down the innocent. "We get her out. Reunite them." Hawk nodded, already dialing contacts, old allies in advocacy, riders who'd navigated red tape before. But as they planned, a shadow fell across the doorway, a social worker, badge gleaming, her expression all clipped efficiency. "Mr. Park, we need to discuss custody. The child's mother?" "Not without us," Hawk interjected, his voice a low rumble that filled the room. The woman faltered, sensing the unbreakable line they'd drawn. Outside, the bikes waited like sentinels, chrome catching the first rays of sun. Hope watched from her bed, her hand finding Victor's jacket again, the smell a bridge across lost years. In that fragile piece, the promise stirred to life, not just his, but theirs. a chorus of loyalty against the encroaching dark. The road to redemption twisted ahead, laced with questions. What had truly kept Elena away, and what forces now hunted to silence their story? But with Iron Promise at his side, Victor felt the weight lift, replaced by the steady hum of engines ready to roar. Honor wasn't forged in isolation, it echoed in the Brotherhood's unyielding call. And now, I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from, and the exact hour you heard this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel, and at what moments they reach you. The social worker's heels clicked sharply against the linoleum, echoing like a challenge in the quiet bay. She was in her 40s, hair pulled into a severe bun, her badge catching the fluorescent light like a cold star. "Mr. Park, this is a matter of protocol," she said, her tone clipped, eyes flicking over the gathered riders with thinly veiled disdain. "The child was found unsupervised. Until we verify her mother's status, custody defaults to the state. Iron Promise or not, you can't just—" Hawk stepped forward, his broad frame blocking the doorway like a weathered oak. The air thickened with the faint tang of leather and exhaust clinging to their jackets, a reminder of roads untamed by forms and files. "Protocol?" he echoed, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the room. "We've seen enough of that to know it buries promises under paperwork. Elena Lynn's out there fighting shadows you folks cast. We're here to light the way." The woman's lips thinned, but she didn't retreat, her clipboard a shield against the unyielding wall of Brotherhood. Victor stayed by Hope's bed, his hand enveloping hers, the steady beep of the monitor syncing with his pulse. The girl's eyes darted between them, wide but trusting now, the jacket draped over her lap like a talisman. He'd broken down once in the rain, raw, unguarded, but this was different. This was the fire kindling, the old scars pulling taut as he faced the machine that had let Elena slip through cracks. Memories flickered, Elena's labored breaths in the wreckage, her plea hanging in the smoke. He'd promised to check on Hope, but the years had eroded it like wind on stone. No more. Lena, ever the quiet anchor, leaned in toward the social worker, her voice soft but edged with steel honed from too many bedside vigils. "Look at her chart. No fever, no breaks, just a kid who wandered because the world's too heavy. Elena's in that halfway house because the crash debts piled up, and your system didn't lift a finger. We have contacts. We can verify everything right now." She pulled out her phone, fingers flying over the screen, pulling up old records from the Brotherhood's network, scans of hospital files, aid logs from that night. The social worker hesitated, glancing at the screen, her resolve cracking like thin ice. Outside, the parking lot hummed with restrained energy. Jax tinkered with his bike under the strengthening sun, the metallic clink of tools a counterpoint to the tension inside. The mist had burned off, revealing a sky streaked with gold, the clinic's faded sign creaking in the breeze. Victor excused himself, stepping into the hall with Hawk, the door whispering shut behind them. "They'll push back," Hawk said, rubbing his beard, eyes scanning the horizon like a sentinel. "Foster placements are quotas to them. But Elena, she's tough. Pulled herself up after the wreck, worked nights at a diner, kept Hope close. Then the calls started, anonymous tips, eviction notices, smells like someone wants her quiet." Victor's gut twisted, the scent of antiseptic clashing with the phantom odor of twisted metal from that long-ago night. Who? The crash? Was it just bad luck? Hawk shook his head, pulling a crumpled printout from his vest. Crew ran a deep dive overnight. Elena's place, tied to a development firm pushing for land grabs. Backroad wrecks like hers get chalked up as accidents, but whispers say faulty roads. Ignored warnings. She spoke up once to a local paper. Next week the debts appeared. Systems corrupt, brother. Protects the powerful, buries the rest. The words landed like gravel under tires, stirring the dust of Victor's own past. He'd left the service with ghosts of his own, buddies lost to forgotten wars, promises whispered in foxholes that war had stolen. Iron Promise had been his redemption then, a creed of chosen kin who rode for the overlooked. Now it called him back, the jacket's worn threads a map of miles untravelled in her name. "We ride for her," Victor said, the vow solidifying, his voice steady as engine idle. "Get Elena here, no more waiting." Back in the bay, the social worker relented under Lena's quiet pressure, agreeing to a supervised visit pending verification. Hope stirred, her small voice cutting through the adult's murmur. "Is Mommy coming?" The jacket man said he would. Victor knelt, the linoleum cool against his knee, meeting her gaze. "Yeah, kiddo, we're making it right." Her smile was tentative, a spark in the sterile light, and in that moment, the room felt less like a cage, more like a crossroads. The convoy reformed as midday heat shimmered off the asphalt. Engines growled to life, a symphony of loyalty that drowned out the clinic's hum. Victor rode point with Hope secured in a sidecar Jax had jury-rigged, safe, strapped in with her rabbit clutched tight. The wind whipped through, carrying the clean bite of soap and oil, mingling with the earth's warming scent. They cut through small towns, past fields golden under the sun, the road unspooling like a thread, pulling fates together. 2 towns over, the halfway house squatted on a quiet street, its paint peeling like old regrets. Eleanor waited on the porch, alerted by a hurried call from Lena, her frame lean but unbowed, dark hair tied back, eyes shadowed by years of quiet battles. She froze as the bikes rolled up, dust swirling in their wake, her hand flying to her mouth. Victor dismounted first, Hope scrambling out behind him, her legs wobbly but determined. "Mommy!" The cry shattered the air, and Elena dropped to her knees, arms enveloping her daughter in a fierce hug, tears carving tracks down her cheeks. Victor hung back, the jacket heavy on his shoulders, watching the reunion unfold like a scene from a half-remembered dream. Elena looked up, her eyes, those same pleading ones from the wreckage, locking on his. "You came," she whispered, voice thick with the weight of survival. "I thought—" The promise faded. He shook his head, stepping closer, the brotherhood fanning out like guardians. "Some things don't. Iron holds." But as joy bloomed, a shadow crept in. A black sedan idled at the street's end, tinted windows hiding watchful eyes. Hawk spotted it first, his hand signaling subtly. The firm, the one eyeing the land, had ears everywhere. Elena's voice trembled as she pulled Victor aside. "They threatened to take Hope, said I'd lose everything if I talked about the crash. It wasn't an accident. The road was sabotaged for that development." Her words hung, a spark to dry tinder. The social worker's call came through Victor's phone minutes later. Delays, more forms, a hearing scheduled. But with the crew's web of advocates, veteran lawyers, riders who'd faced down worse, the tide was turning. They wouldn't let the system swallow them. As the sun dipped low, casting long shadows over the porch, Hope tugged at Elena's sleeve, then Victor's jacket. "Smells like home now," she said simply. In that fragile circle, promises wove tighter, Lealdad not by blood but by choice. The road ahead bristled with opposition, the corrupt machine grinding its gears. But Iron Promise rode for the light, their engines a vow against the gathering dusk. Redemption wasn't a destination, it was this ride, fierce and unrelenting, honoring the small voices that echoed loudest. The sun hung low over the halfway house, its rays slanting through the porch rails like golden bars, casting elongated shadows that danced with the settling dust. Elena held Hope close, her embrace a fortress against the years of fracture. The girl's small body moulding into hers as if time had paused just for this. Victor stood a respectful distance away. the leather of his jacket creaking softly with each breath, the familiar scent of oil and dust now laced with the faint, homey aroma of Elena's faded perfume, lavender from a thrift store bottle, stubborn and enduring. The Brotherhood formed a loose semicircle behind him, their presence a silent bulwark, engines ticking cool in the lot like hearts beating in sync. Elena rose slowly, hope clinging to her leg, and met Victor's gaze. Her face, etched with lines that hadn't been there in the wreckage's haze, softened with a mix of gratitude and wariness. "I kept waiting," she said, her voice a quiet current under the evening breeze. "After the hospital, after they patched me up and sent me on my way with nothing but bills and a baby, I thought you'd forgotten." Victor shook his head, the weight of unspoken miles pressing on him. "Never forgot, just got lost in the ride. But promises like that, they pull you back." He glanced at Hope, who peeked up at him with eyes bright as polished stones, her stuffed rabbit dangling from one hand. Hawk cleared his throat, his boots shifting on the weathered boards, drawing their attention. "We ain't here for old ghosts alone. That sedan's been tailing since the clinic. Elena, you said threats. Who's pulling strings?" She hesitated, glancing at the street where the black car had idled moments before, now vanished into the lengthening dusk. The air cooled, carrying the distant hum of traffic, a reminder of roads that hid more than they revealed. The development firm, Summit Builds, they bought up land after the crash, turned that back road into a shortcut for their crews. But I saw things, barriers down, signs ignored. I told a reporter once, quiet-like, next day the calls came. Drop it or lose the kid. Foster papers showed up overnight, debts doubled. They want the story buried, along with us. Jax, leaning against a porch post with arms crossed, let out a low whistle, the sound sharp as a knife edge. Classic play. We've seen it. Vets pushed out of homes, families scattered for progress that lines pockets. Iron promise, don't bend to that. Lena nodded, her medic's bag slung over her shoulder, pulling out a small recorder. "We document everything. Your words, Elena, they're evidence. No more shadows." The group murmured agreement, a ripple of resolve that thickened the air like the scent of impending rain. As night deepened, they moved inside the halfway house, a dim common room with mismatched chairs and the faint echo of other residents' muffled voices down the hall. Victor helped settle Hope on a worn couch, tucking his jacket around her like a blanket, the leather's warmth chasing away the chill. She yawned, fingers tracing the scars on the sleeve, whispering, "Smells safe." Elena watched, her hand brushing Victor's arm in thanks, a spark of connection igniting in the quiet. For the first time since the storm, Victor felt the fractures in his soul mending, not with words, but with this chosen circle, bound by oaths stronger than steel. Hawk spread a map on the coffee table, its edges frayed from countless rides, marking routes with a grease pencil. "Hearings in 3 days. Their lawyers slick twists custody into a weapon. But we've got pull. Old service buddies in the courts, riders who've stared down worse boards." Victor leaned in, the lamp's glow highlighting the map's veins of highways. Each line a vein of possibility. Memories surfaced unbidden, the foxhole promises of his youth, broken by war's chaos, now mirrored in Elena's fight. He'd run from them once, chasing horizons to outpace the guilt. But here, with the crew's steady presence, redemption felt tangible, a road he could finally navigate. Outside, the night symphony built, crickets chirping in the overgrown yard, the occasional rumble of a passing truck, the subtle creak of bikes cooling under stars, pricking the velvet sky. Lena brewed coffee in the cramped kitchen, the rich, bitter aroma grounding them as plans solidified. "We escort you both to the hearing," she said, handing mugs around. "No solo rides, and Eleanor, if they push. We counter with the truth. The crash files we pulled show ignored maintenance reports. Summit's fingerprints all over it." Eleanor sipped, her shoulders easing fractionally, though her eyes held the flicker of old fears. I just want Hope safe. No more running." Hope dozed off mid-sentence, her breathing even, the jacket rising and falling with her chest. Victor stepped onto the porch for air, the wooden steps groaning under his weight. Hawk joined him, lighting a cigarette, the flame briefly illuminating his cragged face. "You're in deep, brother. That promise, it woke something." Victor stared into the dark, the horizon swallowing the last light. "Woke the man I buried. Service took pieces. The road took more, but this, family like this, it's what pulls you whole." Hawk exhaled smoke, a plume curling like a signal fire. "Iron holds us, and now it holds them." Dawn broke with a blush of pink across the fields, the convoy stirring to life. Engines coughed awake, a chorus that vibrated through the house, rousing Elena and Hope. They packed light, a duffel of clothes, the stuffed rabbit, Victor's jacket folded carefully. As they mounted up, Hope in a secure seat behind Elena on Lena's bike, the girl waved at Victor, her smile a beacon. "We're going home?" she asked, voice carrying over the idling roar. "Yeah," he replied, helmet shadowing his eyes. "The one we build." The ride unfolded under a clear sky, wind whispering secrets through the spokes, the scent of wild grass and tarmac blending into freedom's perfume. But midway, a checkpoint loomed, a state trooper's cruiser blocking the lane, lights flashing lazily. The officer stepped out, hand on his belt, eyes scanning the group with practiced suspicion. "Licenses and registration." "What's the rush?" Hawk pulled ahead, engine purring low. "Just family business, officer, heading to a hearing." The man eyed Elena and Hope, then Victor's jacket. A flicker of recognition or calculation in his gaze. Tension coiled like a spring, the air thick with unspoken stakes. Victor's hand tightened on the throttle, ready to shield if needed. But Lena dismounted smoothly, handing over papers with a calm that belied the storm beneath. "All in order. We're advocates, Veterans Network. Child Services cleared it provisional." The trooper scanned the documents, the pause stretching like a held breath, before nodding curtly. "Move along, but watch the speed." He stepped back, and the convoy surged forward, a unified force parting the barrier. Miles later, as the town limits of the county seat appeared, sprawling buildings under a watchful clock tower, Victor felt the pull intensify. The hearing room waited, a battleground of words where corruption hid behind gavels. Yet with Elena's determined profile ahead, Hope's laughter trailing on the wind, and the Brotherhood's engines thundering solidarity, he knew this promise wasn't just his to keep, it was theirs. A legacy of quiet courage against the grind of injustice. The road curved onward, fraught with trials, but lit by the unyielding spark of honor reclaimed. If this chapter stirred your heart, hit that like button. It helps these stories reach more souls in need of light. The county seat sprawled under a midday sun, its courthouse a squat monument of stone and columns, flanked by manicured lawns that hid the grit beneath. The convoy rolled into the parking lot like a steel tide, engines growling to a halt in precise formation, chrome flashing warnings to the idle sedans nearby. Victor killed his throttle last, the sudden quiet amplifying the distant chime of a clock tower tolling noon. Dust settled around his boots as he dismounted, the air thick with the baked earth scent of sun-warmed asphalt and the faint, acrid tang of exhaust lingering like a vow unspoken. Elena swung off Lena's bike, lifting Hope down with careful hands, the girl's sneakers scuffing the gravel. Hope's eyes darted to the imposing building, its steps worn smooth by countless footsteps carrying burdens heavier than hers. "Is this the place where they fix things?" she asked, clutching her rabbit tighter, the fabric frayed at the edges from endless comfort. Elena knelt, smoothing her daughter's hair, her own face a mask of resolve etched by too many deferred hopes. "Yeah, sweetie. Where truth gets a chance to speak." Victor watched them, the jacket slung over his shoulder now a banner of continuity, its leather warmed by the ride, carrying the blended aromas of windswept fields and the crew's unyielding presence. Hawk gathered them near the bikes, his voice a low anchor amid the lot's bustle, cars' doors slamming, distant voices murmuring from the street. Hearings in an hour. Their side will paint Elena as unstable, the crash as fate's cruel hand. But we've got the files, maintenance logs ignored, Summit's bribes to inspectors buried in public records we unearthed. He tapped a folder tucked under his arm, its edges crisp against the weathered lines of his vest. Jax nodded, adjusting his helmet strap, his medic's calm, a steady pulse. And witnesses, 2 old-timers from the back road who saw the barriers tampered. They'll ride in with us. Lena scanned the horizon, her gaze sharp as a scalpel. Social services is in their pocket, pushback gentle but firm. No cracks for doubt. Inside, the courthouse air hung heavy with polished wood, and the musty whisper of old paper, corridors echoing with the shuffle of heels and the rustle of files. They filed through security, metal detectors beeping softly at belts and keys, Victor's jacket draped over his arm like a shield. Hope stuck close to Elena, her small hand swallowed in her mother's, but she glanced back at Victor with a trust that tugged at his core, the same pull that had shattered him in the rain. The Brotherhood moved as one, their boots a rhythmic thud against marble, drawing sidelong stares from clerks and lawyers in crisp suits. Whispers trailed, bikers in a custody hearing, but in their eyes burned no chaos, only the quiet fire of purpose. The waiting room outside the courtroom was a sterile limbo, benches hard and unforgiving, walls lined with faded posters touting justice's scales. Elena sat rigid, Hope dozing against her shoulder, the girl's breaths soft as summer leaves. Victor paced near the window, sunlight slanting through blinds to stripe the floor in gold and shadow, mirroring the fractured path that had led here. Memories surfaced unbidden, the wreckage's metallic bite in his nostrils, Elena's plea amid the siren's wail. He'd coordinated aid that night, blankets, funds from the crew, but the system's gears had ground on, relocating her to facilities that isolated rather than healed. Guilt coiled in his gut, not for the promise broken, but for the years it slumbered. A door creaked open, and the social worker from the clinic emerged, her bun tighter now, flanked by a suited man whose tie screamed corporate polish. Summit's counsel, no doubt. "Ms. Lynn," she said, voice laced with false concern, "this doesn't have to escalate. Sign the voluntary placement for Hope, and we can avoid the full review. It's for her safety." Eleanor's jaw set, her hand tightening on Hope's. Safety. Like shuffling us through halfway houses while debts pile from a crash you all ignored. The lawyer interjected smoothly, eyes flicking to the riders with calculated disdain. Allegations without proof. The state prioritizes stability. Your associates complicate matters. Hawk rose, his shadow falling long across the room, the air shifting with the subtle creak of leather. Complicate. We're the proof. Veterans network, clean records, and eyes that see through smoke. He slid the folder across a side table, pages fanning slightly, reports of faulty signage, emails hinting at payoffs, testimonies from those roadside witnesses now waiting in the hall. The social worker's composure faltered, her fingers twitching toward the documents. Victor stepped forward, his voice gravel-steady, the jacket's scent wafting faintly as he moved. That crash left scars deeper than skin. Elena fought alone because the system turned blind. We're here to make it see. Tension thickened like fog rolling in, the room's clock ticking louder, each second a pulse against the encroaching dark. Hope stirred, rubbing her eyes, and reached for Victor's jacket without a word, burying her face in its folds. The simple act pierced the standoff, the lawyer's gaze softening fractionally, the social worker's resolve cracking under the weight of a child's quiet faith. Elena met Victor's eyes, a silent gratitude passing between them, forged not in blood, but in the endurance of roads shared. The bailiff's call echoed down the hall, Lynn custody hearing, and they rose as one, the brotherhood framing Elena and Hope like sentinels. The courtroom doors loomed, oak-heavy with the gravity of judgments past, sunlight filtering through high windows to illuminate the judge's bench. Outside, the witnesses nodded, their faces weathered by truths long suppressed. Victor felt the promise swell within him, no longer a buried echo, but a living engine propelling them forward. Corruption's web stretched tight here, threads of influence pulling from shadowed corners, but iron promise cut through with loyalty's blade, subtle, unyielding. As they entered, the air hummed with anticipation, gavels silent, but fates hanging in the balance. Eleanor straightened, Hope's hand in hers, Victor's jacket a talisman against the storm. The hearing would test them, unearth secrets that Summit fought to entomb. But in this chosen circle, redemption rode shotgun, its path lit by honor's enduring glow. The road curved sharper now, toward confrontation's edge, where small voices could topple giants built on lies. The courtroom's heavy doors swung shut with a resonant thud, sealing the air inside like a vault of polished oak and echoing murmurs. Sunlight slanted through tall, arched windows, dust motes swirling in golden shafts that illuminated the judge's bench. A raised altar of dark wood, flanked by the American flag, its folds still against the hush. Victor guided Elena and Hope to the plaintiff's table, his hand light on her elbow, the jacket now folded over the wooden rail beside them, its leather absorbing the room's faint mustiness of aged paper and wax. Hope climbed onto the cushioned seat, her legs dangling, fingers tracing the scarred sleeve as if drawing strength from its familiar texture. The subtle whiff of oil and dust, a quiet anchor amid the stranger's stares. The gallery filled slowly, a murmur rising like distant thunder. Locals in faded denim, a cluster of reporters with notebooks poised, and the two witnesses from the back road, grizzled men in overalls, their faces etched by sun and suspicion. Hawk settled in the front row with Jax and Lena, their presence a solid line of leather and resolve, boots planted firm on the scuffed floorboards. Summit's counsel occupied the defense side, a trio in sharp suits, whispering urgently to the social worker whose clipboard now seemed a flimsy barrier. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s with silver-streaked hair and glasses perched low on her nose, entered to the bailiff's call, gavel rapping once, sharp as a starter's pistol. "Ms. Lynn versus the state on custody of Hope Lynn," the clerk intoned, voice flat and procedural, slicing through the tension. Elena straightened, her hands clasped tight on the table's edge, knuckles paling like porcelain under strain. Victor sat beside her, not as counsel but as witness, his broad frame a silent bulwark. The judge's gaze swept the room, lingering on the riders with a flicker of curiosity before settling on the social worker. "Proceed with opening statements." The state's attorney rose first, a slick man with a practiced smile, his words oiled and smooth. "Your Honor, this is a case of instability. Ms. Lynn's history, debts from an unfortunate accident, transient living, poses risks to the child's welfare. Foster placement ensures stability, free from external influences." He gestured vaguely toward the brotherhood, his tone laced with implication, eyes sliding over Victor's jacket like it was an exhibit of chaos. Hope shifted, her small foot kicking the table leg softly, the sound a tiny protest in the room's gravity. Elena gripped the table harder, but Lena's nod from the gallery steadied her, a subtle signal across the divide. When her turn came, Elena stood, voice clear despite the tremor beneath, like wind through canyon stone. "That accident stole my stability. The back road was rigged, barriers removed for a firm shortcut. I fought for us alone because no one listened. Hope's my world. I won't let shadows take her." She placed a hand on Hope's shoulder, The girl's eyes wide, absorbing the words like sunlight on water. The judge leaned forward, pen scratching notes. Evidence, Miss Lynn. That's when Hawke slid the folder to the bailiff earlier, its contents now projected on a screen. Faded maintenance logs stamped ignored. Emails from summit executives to county officials, hints of kickbacks veiled as consulting fees. The first witness took the stand, an old farmer with calloused hands and a voice rough as gravel. Saw it myself, ma'am, night before the crash. Trucks hauling barriers off that curve, Summit's logo bold as day. Told the deputies, they shrugged. The room stirred, reporters scribbling furiously, the defense attorney's face tightening like a coiled spring. Summit's counsel objected sharply. Hearsay, speculation. But the judge overruled, her eyes narrowing at the screen's damning glow. Victor's pulse thrummed steady. The courtroom's air growing thicker, laced with the faint electric scent of overhead fluorescence, humming to life. He remembered Elena's porch confession, the black sedan's shadow, and now it unfolded here. Truth uncoiling like a road straightening after miles of twists. Hope leaned into him, whispering, "They're listening, jacket man." Her words, innocent as a breeze, cracked something in him. The promise from that smoky night, blooming full. Cross-examination turned heated, the lawyer probing Elena's finances, her associations with unconventional groups. These bikers, do they influence your decisions, Miss Lynn? Endanger the child? Elena met his gaze, unflinching. They saved us. When your system buried us, they dug for light. Victor rose then, sworn in with a hand on the Bible. Its leather cool against his palm, ironic echo of his jacket. I pulled her from the wreck 8 years back, promised to watch over Hope. Life pulled me away, but I kept tabs through networks. Elena's no flight risk, the risks in silencing her. The gallery murmured approval, Hawke's nod a beacon from the shadows. The second witness corroborated, detailing tampered signs and rushed permits, his testimony painting Summit's greed in stark lines. The social worker squirmed under redirect, her earlier reports exposed as rushed, incomplete, pressured perhaps by higher calls. The judge removed her glasses, rubbing the bridge of her nose, the room holding its breath as she deliberated silently, the clock's tick amplifying like an engine idling at redline. "Recess for review," she finally declared, gavel falling like judgment's first note. The courtroom exhaled, doors swinging open to the corridor's brighter light, where sunlight pooled on marble like spilled gold. Elena hugged Hope close, tears glistening but unshed, her whisper to Victor carrying the weight of reclaimed ground. "You kept it alive?" He nodded, the jacket's scent rising as he draped it over her shoulders, a shield against the lingering chill of doubt. Outside, the crew regrouped in the lot, bikes gleaming under the climbing sun, the air alive with the sharp tang of hot metal and distant lawn clippings. Hawke clapped Victor's back, his grin fierce. "Tide's turning, brother, but they ain't done. Expect pushback." Jax checked Hope's water bottle, a small kindness amid the stakes, while Lena reviewed notes on her phone, the screen's glow reflecting determination in her eyes. The black sedan circled the block once, slow and predatory, before vanishing into traffic, a reminder that corruption's roots ran deep, feeding on silence. As they waited for the reconvene, Victor knelt to Hope's level, the asphalt warm beneath his knee, her face framed by the courthouse's shadow. "Scared?" he asked, voice low. She shook her head, fingers brushing his arm. "Not with the smell. It's like Daddy's stories, heroes who come back." The words pierced, evoking ghosts of his own lost kin. But in her trust, he found the thread to weave them whole. Elena watched, her hand finding his briefly. A spark of alliance forged in fire's aftermath. The bailiff's call pulled them back inside, the room settling into expectant hush. The judge returned, her expression unreadable as she addressed the court. New evidence warrants investigation into the crash's circumstances. Custody remains with Ms. Lin, provisionally, pending full review. Summit builds to provide records within 48 hours. Relief washed through like a cool wind. Elena's sob soft, Hope's cheer a bright note, but the defense's glare promised appeals, deeper probes, the machine grinding slower but unrelenting. Victor felt the promise solidify, not ended but evolving, a legacy etched in this victory's fragile ink. Outside, as the sun arced toward afternoon, the convoy revved to life, engines a triumphant roar, carrying them from the courthouse's shadow. Yet whispers of retaliation lingered, the firm's tendrils reaching for retaliation. Redemption's road stretched on, laced with trials, but with iron promises bond, they rode united, honor's quiet thunder echoing against the dusk. The engine's triumphant roar faded into the afternoon haze as the convoy carved a path away from the courthouse, the blacktop unspooling like a ribbon of reclaimed freedom under tires humming with purpose. Victor rode in the middle of the pack, Elena and Hope secured on Lena's bike just ahead, the girls' laughter trailing back on the wind, a sound pure as the first rain after drought, cutting through the growl of exhaust and the sharp scent of sun-baked rubber. The jacket, now zipped against Elena's frame for the ride, fluttered slightly at the edges, its leather carrying the blended essences of oil, dust, and the faint lavender that clung to her skin, a bridge spanning the chasm of lost years. They veered off the main highway toward a quiet overlook, a gravel pullout perched on a rise where the land rolled out in waves of golden fields, dotted with silos standing sentinel against the horizon. Hawk signaled the stop with a gloved fist raised high, and the bikes settled one by one, their idles softening to a contented purr before silence claimed the air, save for the whisper of breeze through tall grasses and the distant call of a hawk wheeling overhead. Victor dismounted, boots crunching on loose stones, and helped Elena ease Hope down, the child's sneakers kicking up puffs of dust that danced in the slanting light. Elena pulled Hope into a hug, her arms wrapping tight as if to etch the moment into permanence, tears tracing silent paths down her cheeks. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in strokes of amber and rose, casting long shadows that merged their figures into one unbreakable silhouette. "It's over," Elena murmured, her voice thick with the weight of battles won and scars bared. "They can't touch us now." But Victor knew better. The provisional ruling was a foothold, not the summit. Summit Build's lawyers would appeal, their tendrils snaking through appeals courts and backroom deals. Yet in this pause, with the crew forming a protective arc behind them, it felt like victory's first true breath. Hawk approached, his face weathered by the road's confessions, folder still tucked under his arm like a talisman. "Judge ordered the probe. Full audit on those crash reports. Our witnesses lit the fuse. Reporters are already circling like vultures on fresh meat." He glanced at the horizon, where thunderheads gathered faintly, a promise of storms yet to break. Jax knelt nearby, unpacking a cooler from his saddlebag, sandwiches wrapped in foil, cold drinks beaded with condensation, the simple ritual grounding them amid the stakes. Lena joined, her nurse's instincts guiding her to check Hope's color, the girl's cheeks flushed with the thrill of motion and reunion. "You're a trooper, little one," she said softly, ruffling her hair. Hope beamed, clutching her rabbit, then darted to Victor, tugging his sleeve. "Did we win the race?" Victor's throat tightened, the question stirring echoes of foxholes and faded oaths, the service's ghosts that had driven him to the highways in search of absolution. He scooped her up, her weight light as hope itself, and nodded toward the endless fields. "First lap, yeah, but the road's long, keeps teaching us to hold tight." Elena watched, her eyes meeting his over Hope's shoulder. a quiet understanding passing between them, not romance's spark, but the deeper forge of shared survival, promises kept in the quiet spaces between words. The jacket, draped now over a bike's handlebar, caught the light, its scars gleaming like badges of endurance. As they ate, the conversation turned to the shadows ahead. "That sedan, Summit's eyes," Hawk said, biting into his sandwich, the crunch of bread underscoring his words. "They'll push for delays, smear Elena's name in the press, but we've got momentum. Vets in the DA's office, riders who've lawyered up against worse." Elena nodded, sipping from a bottle, the cool liquid steadying her. "I spoke up because silence was killing us slow. The crash, it wasn't fate. Faulty rails, rushed permits for their sprawl. I lost friends in that wreck too. Passengers who didn't make it out clean." Her voice wavered, but she pressed on, the crew listening in respectful hush, the wind carrying her truth like seeds to fertile ground. Victor felt the pull of it all. The moral compass that Iron Promise embodied, a family chosen in the crucible of roads and regrets. He'd broken once in the rain, defenses crumbling under a child's touch. But here, amid the golden light and the Brotherhood's unyielding circle, he stood whole. "We ride it out together," he said, his gravel tone cutting clean. "No more ghosts. Your fight's ours." Hope, munching an apple slice, piped up, "Like the jacket, it came back." Laughter rippled through them, light as the breeze, easing the tension coiled in their frames. Dusk crept in as they mounted up again, the sky deepening to indigo, stars pricking through like distant campfires. The convoy rolled toward a safe haven, a roadside motel on the outskirts, its neon sign flickering vacancy in welcoming red, the air thick with the comforting aroma of pine from nearby woods and the faint sizzle of a diner grill nearby. They claimed adjoining rooms, the crew bunking in shifts to watch the perimeter, engines parked like faithful hounds. Inside, with Hope tucked into bed between Elena and Victor on a sagging couch, the room filled with the soft rhythm of her breathing, the lamp's glow casting warm pools on the worn carpet. Elena leaned against the headboard, exhaustion etching her features, but peace softening the edges. "Thank you," she whispered, her hand finding his in the dimness, "for carrying that promise across the miles." Victor squeezed gently, the calluses of his palm rough against her skin. "Wasn't carrying alone. Iron Promise, Hawk, Jax, Lena. They're the hold." Outside, the night's vigil began, Hawk on the porch, cigarette glowing like a sentinel's eye. The distant hum of traffic a reminder of worlds that moved on, oblivious to quiet victories. By morning, word came via Lena's phone, a buzzing alert from their network. The probe had escalated, Summit's CEO subpoenaed, cracks widening in the facade of clean progress. Reporters swarmed the firm's gates, Elena's story breaking through the noise, a testament to persistence over power. Custody solidified, no appeals, full exoneration of debts tied to the crash. As sunlight filtered through thin curtains, Hope stirred, reaching instinctively for the jacket folded nearby, inhaling its scent with a contented sigh. "Home," she murmured. The crew gathered for breakfast in the motel's lot, coffee steaming in tin mugs, the air crisp with dew and the promise of clear roads. Hawk raised his cup, eyes scanning the group, scars and smiles intertwined, to promises that endure. They echoed it, a vow woven into the dawn. Victor watched Elena and Hope laugh over pancakes, the weight of redemption settling not as burden, but as legacy, a quiet honor passed forward. Months blurred into a new rhythm, Eleanor and Hope in a modest home funded by Brotherhood grants, Victor a steady visitor, his bike's rumble a welcome herald. Summit's empire crumbled under indictments, the back road restored, justice poetic in its unraveling. Iron Promise rode on, tales of the jacket's call spreading through their ranks, a reminder that family chose you. Loyalty outlasted rust, and small touches could shatter walls built on lies. In the end, redemption wasn't a finish line, but the endless highway, lit by courage's glow, echoing with the unbreaking hum of engines true. Thank you for riding this journey with us. If these stories of honor and heart move you, subscribe for more chapters of quiet courage and hit that notification bell. We tell these tales to light the way for souls like yours.